Well, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Dan Hurley. I'm Chair-elect and Director of the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance. I'm also Principal and Co-founder of the Hurley Martin Group, a public relations and engagement partnership based here on Gabriola Island. I want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish, Nuu-Chah-Nulth, and Kwakiutl peoples. And I also want to thank the Chartered Professional Accountants of British Columbia for being today's sponsor. This is now the 13th in VIEA's video series to unite and connect decision makers and to inform and engage on economic vitality on Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands, both now and along the road to recovery. Today, we're pleased to have a panel of Vancouver Island CPAs who will provide guidance on a variety of issues, including how to make the most of government financial assistance, how to work with your bank to access lending programs, and what you need to know about extended tax deadlines. But before we begin, some notes about the format for our session. Our presentation today will last about 15 minutes. We have a moderator and we have 3 speakers. We want to allow some additional time for that today. And we will also follow that by about 15 to 20 minutes of questions and answers. So we can expect to be done at about 10 past 12 today. To ask a question, please enter it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Simply enter the question and it will come to me, and I will do my best to pose as many questions as we can during the time that we have. If we don't get to your question today, please send an email to our president, George Hansen, at george@viea.ca. We ask everyone to please keep your mutes on and your videos off during the presentation, and in order not to disrupt the flow. So at this time, I'd like to introduce and welcome Stephanie Roy, Manager of Employer Relations at CPA BC, to introduce our speakers today. Hello, Stephanie, welcome to our Zoom room.
Hello, Dan, and thank you. Well done on my last name, very good. So yes, as Dan mentioned, my name is Stephanie Roy, or Roy, for those of you who speak French. I'm the Manager of Employer Relations at CPA BC, and it's my pleasure to be with you today and to introduce our panel of CPAs. This global health crisis has quickly turned into an economic crisis, and I know many of you will be glad to see that the province is beginning to reopen. But as the public health officer has said, we still have a little ways to go, or perhaps a long ways, we'll have to see. As new information is announced almost daily, the businesses and individuals have been turning to CPAs as their trusted advisors to help them navigate through this unprecedented time. CPAs, as some of you know, play key roles within diverse segments of our economy, including industry, public accounting, government, education, and the not-for-profit sector. So with this in mind, we've invited a panel of Vancouver Island CPAs who will provide guidance on the topics that Dan mentioned earlier. I will get the conversation going with a few of my own questions, and then we'll turn it over to Dan for the questions from the floor within the chat. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to today's speakers. We have Erin McCammon, who's a partner at Johnston & Associates based in Nanaimo. We have Marc Johnston, who's the corporate controller at Strategic Natural Resource Consultants, and he's based in Campbell River. And Simon Philp, who's the market vice president of commercial banking at CIBC and based in Victoria, I believe. And I will start with you, Marc. So Marc, as a CPA working in industry, you've been working on managing the impacts on your own business. So there have been a lot of government financial assistance programs out there. It can be pretty complex to keep track of all the changes and amendments that can be made to those programs. Do you have any insight or suggestions on what has worked for you and for your organization?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I have been on the internet. It seems like half of my day is keeping up with all the different changes that are going on. So what I've been doing is keeping a spreadsheet. I mean, after all, I am an accountant. We like spreadsheets. So I will share that with you. Hopefully you can see this. So I have columns over basically the benefits, the description of the programs, the dollar amounts that are benefited. I've even got some estimated costs of the programs. So it's a big spreadsheet, so I only got 5 minutes, so I'm gonna have to speak real fast. So we've got the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. I think most businesses hopefully have looked into that because it's a very large program, $73 billion. And the website is there. This canada.ca/coronavirus has a lot of information, so I suggest going in there. The temporary wage subsidy, that was the first announcement. The CEWS was the second announcement. They are kind of tied together. So when you're applying for the CEWS, you do have to report whether you're eligible for the temporary wage subsidy. For individuals, the Canada Employment Response Benefit, the CERB, is a very big program, large program, $35 billion cost. There's the key dates and eligibility there. The CEBA, the business account, this is also for businesses. They're more on the small business side. You could be eligible for this program and the CEWS, or one or the other, or neither, it depends. So you just got to work through all the eligibility requirements. It's a process, but it's probably worth it because everybody needs help these days. This one is the Rent Assistance Program that was recently introduced, and it's administered by CMHC. Work Sharing Program, it's just been enhanced. Canada Emergency Student Benefit, that was recently introduced. I don't know about all of the eligibility requirements, but it's $9.2 billion, so it's fairly significant. Canada Summer Jobs Program, there's some big enhancements to that program, which it's not the first time it's been around though. There's the EI Sickness Benefit Program, which is now waiving the 1 week waiting period. Indigenous peoples have, there's various benefits that you can go to the website there to find out. Sector-specific support, again, just go to the website. It's going to be directed towards the airlines, oil and gas, tourism, restaurants, that sort of thing. Regional specific needs, there's help for. Increasing the Canada Child Benefit, so there's no need to reapply if you're already receiving that, but that's been increased. GST credit, which is a tax-free quarterly payment. I think the Canada Child Benefit is tax-free as well. Again, no need to apply. It should just be increased. GST, if you're a business with GST, you can defer your payments. So that is a good thing. There's lots of payment deferrals. If you're not avoiding it, you're not getting it forgiven, but you can defer it, which is helpful. Same thing with business income tax. You can defer that. Individual income tax, those reporting deadlines have also changed. Funding for small and medium-sized businesses for Indigenous businesses. There's the website for further detail. The Industrial Research Assistance Program. It's another, I don't know a whole lot about it, but there's the website if you would like to find out more. Feel free to take a screenshot and use this to prompt you to do more research. Retired individuals have various programs that are assisting them. There's the website. Policy rate changes. Bank of Canada has announced 3 rate reductions, which the banks have passed on to the consumer. So the prime rate is now down to 2.45%. Again, lending institutions have offered mortgage payment deferrals, so you don't have to pay your interest or principal, and it doesn't affect your credit. So that's great. The websites are there. Last but not least, CIBC.ca. There you go, Simon. Business credit availability programs. I think Simon might be talking about that later. Fortis BC has a payment deferral WorkSafe BC also, you can defer your payments. Key dates are there. BC Hydro has a couple different programs. Eligibility requirements have to be met. BC Emergency Benefit for Workers is a one-time tax-free payment of $1,000 with eligibility, of course, there. Climate Action Tax Credit Enhancement, that's automatic, I believe, if you're already getting that. Income and Disability Assistance Supplements. If you're receiving income or disability assistance, that payment will be automatically increased by $300 for three months. Temporary rental supplements for $500 a month for 3 months if you are a BC resident and other eligibility requirements are met. And BC Healthcare Tax. They've extended the deadlines to report your 2019 and to pay it until September 30th. There's a few other programs that are not specific to COVID-19 programs, but they're also here. Eco Canada, Nivets, or North Vancouver Island Aboriginal Training Society, BC Government Get Youth Working, and PLT Canada. There's a couple of other good, useful websites that summarize this information in good ways, so I also recommend going there. So I think I'm probably over my time. I'll stop the screen share. There you go.
All right, thank you, Marc. That's a lot of information and definitely requires a lot of research. So we'll keep things moving along. So I'm gonna go to you next, Simon, to leave room for some questions towards the end. So you're in the banking sector. What are your commercial banking teams hearing from customers about business on the island and how they're managing, businesses on the island, how they're managing through this? There are a couple of lending programs backed by the government. Marc touched on some of those. Can you briefly describe those programs and why a company would choose one or another?
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks to the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance for putting these sessions together. I'd say a couple of things. First, observation that the impact, I think we've all realized sort of how broad this is. You know, the fact that restaurants and hotels and tourism have taken a hit, but if you think about sort of prior downturns, we haven't seen municipal governments laying off or transit authorities laying off. Like this is, so, you know, the depth and sort of severity of what we're going through has certainly come through in a lot of those conversations. On the plus side, I'd say there's actually some companies that are still doing really well, and they found a way to sort of prosper through this. Somewhat surprisingly, a lot of the forest-related companies on the North Island, which, if you think about it, they've been through strikes and trade disruptions, but a number of them are doing quite well. They're certainly not on track for a record year, but they're managing liquidity, they're managing their programs, and still making money and prospering. I'd also say, sort of on a more personal level, I've been really impressed with a lot of our young, new commercial bankers. They haven't been through a downturn before, and the work ethic and the resiliency and the conversations they're having they're inspiring, and it's really, really neat to see. I think, you know, future generations coming up through the workforce give you a lot of confidence, you know, in terms of what's coming through. The other thing that I think is a takeaway is just that, you know, it's never been more true that hope isn't a strategy. That it's strong management teams that pull in their suppliers, their customers, their employees as partners, that are partnering with their CPAs. In a lot of cases, they're external CPAs. They're developing new strategies. They're finding ways to take advantage of this. And in a lot of ways, that's going to be what's going to get society going again, and help lead the economic recovery. So that again is pretty inspiring. In terms of the two programs, Marc touched on just the amazing number of different programs that are out there. The two that launched just in the last week or two, referred to sort of as the business credit availability or BCAP programs. And there's basically the banks are partnering, commercial banks are partnering with either Export Development Canada, who's been given a domestic mandate through this, as well as the Business Development Bank as sort of the arms of government for helping to get this support money out. And the way the programs work is pretty similar. You approach your existing commercial bank. You have to approach your existing commercial bank because they're the ones that have got the history, financial information, know you, and they'll make an assessment about how much credit is appropriate for you based largely on what your earnings were pre-COVID. So, and then the loan amount will be dispersed by your commercial bank, but supported by either BDC or EDC in the background. The difference between the two programs is really that if you're looking for a loan, if you actually need cash now and you're going to take a loan, your commercial bank will likely work with BDC. If you're really looking for additional liquidity just in case, they're more likely to work with EDC. But again, it's really important to stress that in all cases, these programs are not intended to support businesses that were having trouble pre-COVID. You basically have to have had a solid track record prior to COVID, and then it's the impacts of this particular health crisis that are hitting your business. That's what these programs are really designed for.
Thank you, Simon. All right, so last but not least, I'm gonna turn it over to our public accountant on the panel, Erin. This is normally a very busy time for CPAs working in public accounting, but I imagine it's been even busier for you this year. We touched on it when we first got on the call. How can business owners prepare relevant information so that they can help you as their CPA, give them the best advice? There are a number of tax measures put in place recently, including extensions to tax deadlines. So if you could provide a little bit of insight and guidance on that, that would be great.
Sure, yeah, the filing tax deadlines have been extended for personal taxes to the end of May, which happens to fall on a Sunday, so June 1st. The extension of 30 days has really been helpful for a lot of people who were unable to leave their homes to bring their taxes in or to meet with their tax advisor. But we have really changed the way in which we operate this year to accommodate a lot of people. So we have been able to set up a drop-off area in our office where clients can come in and drop off their information. And we've been doing a lot of things over emails these days. So things have really changed this year compared to last year. But one thing that's really helpful for people, I believe, is that while you do still have to file your taxes by June 1st, you don't have to pay any amounts owing until the end of August. So August 31st is the payment deadline, and that's for personal GST as well. The biggest thing I think for business owners and their CPAs is open communication. There are so many different, as you saw with Marc, there's so many different opportunities available for help right now. If you communicate with your CPA about where you need help and where you're succeeding, but also where you're finding difficulties within your business, and the more that your CPA knows about your business and about what you're doing and where you're struggling, the better that we can help as external accountants. When all of the announcements are made, it felt like every day they were changing programs. You had to have $50,000 in wages last year to access the Canadian Emergency Business Account, and then they switched it to 20,000. And they were doing a lot of different things with the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. They kept changing the requirements. So I think that it's really important to communicate with your external accountant, and them having a good idea of what your business does and where it's at, before you even know you're eligible for it, your CPA could know. Knowing what requirements are met and what opportunities are available. There's so many different websites out there right now that are trying to provide as much information as they can, but a number of websites are a little bit slower and behind. So I think contacting your CPA and allowing them to do the research, because we do, you know, like Marc said earlier, we spend a number of hours every day, you know, accumulating the different changes and the different information that on all of the different benefits. So accessing your CPA's knowledge and resources is really beneficial, because that will allow business owners to focus on their business and help run the business and tap into your CPA's breadth of knowledge and expertise.
Thank you, Erin. That's very helpful. So yes, there definitely are a lot of resources, but there are a lot of people out there who can help you navigate them. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan, as he's been monitoring the chat, and he'll be able to get some questions from the floor to you guys. So I'm going to bow out here.
All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. A lot of good information there. The first question I have here is, how effective has the Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance been? Are landlords receptive to taking less rent? Are there specific programs for tour? Okay, that's the first question. First question here, are landlords, are you finding in your own experience, whether you're dealing with tenants or landlords, what the general uptake has been for the rent assistance program? Who wants to take that one?
I haven't had a lot of experience with it yet. A number of our clients will likely want to take advantage of this program, but I think they're not necessarily flowing through their external accountant. I think the tenants are communicating more directly with the landlords. So there hasn't been a lot of work for us to do in this area at this time.
I'd kind of echo Erin's comments. I think it's still a new program, and you know, I think there are some limitations. I think that those conversations have started, but I don't know that we've got enough results yet to sort of say definitively how effective it's going to be.
Yeah, I think from at least what I'm seeing in some media, there are some cases where the landlords are not yet willing to take that take advantage of the program, and it might be, again, too early. It's a new program, and there's been lots of changes even within the program, and the same thing with tenants. So I think continuing to share that with decision makers, MPs, and so forth about these things, and also to reflect it to you as professional accountants, I think that'll be very helpful. So the next question I have, there was a question here about programs for the tourism sector. Are there programs available? I just know, having hosted a session a couple of, like last week with the Tourism Vancouver Island, there is the Coastal Resiliency Program, which has now been launched, very specific, targeted towards a tourism program. So that is definitely one you want to check out, Tourism Vancouver Island, in partnership with the Island Coastal Economic Trust. Are there any other suggestions for anyone specific in the tourism industry? Does anyone want to respond to that?
Certainly from tourism is a big part of the island economy, and so you certainly, when we look at some of the companies that have come in for assistance under some of the emergency lending programs, a number of them do fit into the tourism sector more broadly. You know, I don't know. The question sort of sounds a little bit more like it's oriented toward a lot of the tourism associations across Canada have been talking about the need for a much more significant injection. You know, debt, as we all know, is like, it comes with its own downfalls, and that it does have to be repaid. And so to the extent that, you know, the recovery takes longer, you know, debt may or may not be the right solution for every business in the tourism sector, that's for sure. So.
Yeah, that would certainly be in the case of taking advantage of the loans program and the business accountants and so forth. The next question has to do with the 10% wage subsidy versus the emergency wage subsidy. So can you just explain what the difference is? Is one replace the other? Does it reduce the amount paid out through the emergency wage subsidy?
I can probably speak to that. So they are tied. My understanding is that it will reduce what you're allowed to claim on the wage subsidy. So if you're eligible, I believe it reduces it. So initially, I was confused by it myself. So because things change, like I called Canada Revenue Agency, they said they're not tied. And then when I fill out an application, they are tied. So I believe that they are tied. And if you are applying for the wage subsidy, the temporary one that you're eligible for reduces what you would be eligible for on the larger program.
Erin, did you want to respond?
Sure. The 10% wage subsidy came out first, and so a lot of businesses applied for it immediately as soon as it was available. But then when they released the 75% wage subsidy, they didn't want people taking advantage of both. So you can have one or the other. And I know that the 75% is a lot more difficult to be eligible for. For the month of March, your sales had to be down 15% over last year, whereas April and May, your sales have to be down, your gross revenue has to be down 30% over last year. They opened it up for some other testing, but briefly that's the requirement. So you may be eligible for the 10% if you're not eligible for the 75%. But the reason that I think that you think that they're tied is because if you applied for the 10% subsidy and you received, like you reduced your source deduction remittance by that amount that you were eligible for, they didn't want to then pay out the 75% subsidy in addition to what you have. So when you fill out the application, you do have to disclose how much you received in the the 10% wage subsidy, and it will reduce the amount that you get back for the 75% subsidy, because you can't do both, but you can go back and forth. So if you qualify for 75% for March, you fill out the application and get that back. But if your sales are down in April 20%, you may consider doing the 10% for April. If your sales are down again in May, down to say 35%, you could do the 75% wage subsidy, but then any amount that you claim in the 10% in May, you deduct off of the amount that you get. Clear as mud?
Well, that certainly makes it more clear.
Yeah.
For sure. So so just to Marc, there's been a lot of questions here about your spreadsheet because it was jam-packed full of helpful information. Are you able to share that information with us that we can share with people on request?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, that in itself is a study. We could probably run a whole course on the breadth of programs that are now available. Yeah, but I think having that information is definitely very helpful. Now, in terms of some of the other benefits, especially coming from the BC government, any feedback or points that you would want to raise with folks here on the call?
I don't have anything other than just you got to stay fluid. You got to maybe look at that spreadsheet to prompt you to investigate further.
I was just going to make a personal comment that I know BC was one of the first to provide renters assistance across the country, and I think it's clearly a very vulnerable or a group with more vulnerable people, and so I think kudos to our provincial government for picking that up. It's certainly one of a number of areas where our provincial government provided great leadership nationally.
Well, and another announcement that just came out this morning is the federal government and the provinces have come to an agreement on helping to boost salaries and wages for essential workers. So that's new information that's just been released today. And that's helpful if you're working in that particular industry. The other thing too, this week, the BC subsidy for workers is now available. So that's $1,000 one time. So it's another bit of information that if you don't already know about that, or you know someone that could take advantage of that, be able to pass that on. So next question here has to do with this summer student program. Do we have any additional information, or are you aware of any additional information on that? I know that announcement came out probably about 2 weeks ago at this point, and there was the funding for students, student employment. There was funding for service as well, and there is some additional funding, which of course for employers that can take advantage of that, as well as an extension to the Canada Summer Jobs Program. So any comments on that from our panelists? Okay, well, it is there. And some of these things are still moving very quickly. And I've said it on many calls, but the speed at which these programs are being launched and released is quite remarkable. And the fact that they are getting up in the time that they are in normal circumstances would be quite unique. But obviously our need is strong. And so some of these things are still being put together. Some of the time frame for when they're open and accepting applications is still unfolding, but important to be able to see the scope of these programs. So we're just near the end of our time here. Maybe we can do a final round. Stephanie and team, any final remarks before we conclude?
Well, I thank you for putting the panel together and for doing these sessions. I saw Stephanie just came back in just as I was opening the mic. But and Dan, to your earlier comment, you asked about the provincial government, but the federal government's 40K program. I know we had. I've never seen anything quite as effective. The companies that were eligible for it filled out their applications online. We had an enormous number of customers that received their funds in their bank account in less than 5 business days after they'd completed the application. It's absolutely amazing, the coordination, and just a fantastic story in terms of how effective that program was to get money out where it was needed.
Yeah, and now more than just the chartered banks, credit unions also have access to those funds and are taking advantage of it. And there's some good advantages if you are in a position to access those funds. And the fact that 10,000 of the 40 is non-repayable, and the length of time, it goes until the end of 2022, I believe. So it's a good 2.5 years before it does need to be repaid. So there's certainly a benefit in looking into that advantage for your enterprise. Well, okay, so that's it. No more questions. I'm sure that we've just filled them with so much information. I do think there's a lot of interest, Marc, in your spreadsheet, that's for sure. So maybe we can do a homework session and come back next week, and then we'll do a test, see how many people remember the titles and the acronyms of all these programs. So we'll get the information out to our followers here on how to access that information following the session. So thank you very much, Stephanie, Marc, Simon, and Erin. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so our session today, of course, has been recorded. It can be found on our website, viea.ca, later today, and it will be available on our social media channels. We will have 2 sessions next week, including Tuesday, May 12th at 11:30. We're still confirming the speaker, but please keep an eye out for details. And next Friday at 11:30, we will have Johan Tommy of MNP, who will be here to speak about one of the programs we discussed today very briefly, and that is the Federal Work-Share Program. So we will dive in deeper on the Federal Work-Share Program next Friday at 11:30. So please join us at that time. Please do follow us on social media. Please do sign up for our e-newsletter. And in the meantime, please keep good company, and we will see you again. Thank you very much.